Most people don't even realize how much they've been programmed to believe that achieving anything meaningful in life must be difficult, complex, and time consuming. From the time the mind is young, it gets fed the same stories over and over that hard work is the only way, that struggle equals value, and that patience means waiting endlessly while being miserable in the present. So, when the idea of manifestation enters the conversation that desires can show up simply through imagination, belief, and persistence, it almost feels wrong, even offensive, to everything that was taught before. But maybe that's exactly the problem. Maybe the reason things feel stuck or difficult isn't because manifestation doesn't work, but because the mind has been overcomplicating something that was always meant to be simple. And what if that simplicity is the very thing that makes it so powerful? What if the reason results take so long is because of all the extra effort, overthinking, second guessing, and emotional attachment to when and how it shows up? It's not that the technique is broken, it's that the belief system is noisy. The truth is, the subconscious mind doesn't need 100 affirmations. It doesn't need daily scripting marathons. And it definitely doesn't need to be monitored 24 hours a day like some toddler. What it needs is clarity and consistency. That's it. Think about how many times people unknowingly imagine the worst, expect delays, assume rejection, or play out entire mental movies of things going wrong. And then it happens exactly like that in real life. No one questioned that. No one said, "How did I manifest that failure?" But it happened through the same process. It was a subconscious assumption that got replayed and accepted until it showed up in the outer world. So if that can happen without effort, then the same process works in the opposite direction, too. It's just that when it comes to good things, most people start doubting, overthinking, checking, and trying to force it. And that clogs the whole process. Manifestation was never supposed to be a job. It's not a system to be micromanaged or a technique to be mastered. It's a natural, ongoing function of the imagination. It doesn't start when someone decides to manifest, it's been happening the entire time. And the moment that is seen clearly, the entire approach changes. There's no longer any need to fight circumstances or manipulate outcomes, because the real shift begins within. That's the whole point. That's where the freedom lies. So instead of trying to fix everything outside, the invitation is to simplify everything inside. Decide clearly. Assume it fully. Persist calmly. That's the formula. That's the simplicity most people have been overlooking. The moment that clicks, manifestation becomes fast, natural, and even fun, just like it was always meant to be. Everything starts with a decision. Not a half-hearted hope. Not a vague desire. Not a maybe someday kind of wish, but a clear, grounded, and final decision that says, "This is what I choose, and I'm not backing down." And yet, that's where most people get stuck. Not because they don't want something badly enough, but because deep down, they're afraid to actually claim it. The fear usually comes dressed up as logic. Thoughts like, "What if I'm asking for too much?" Or, "What if this never happens?" Or even worse, "Do I even deserve this?" creep in silently and start chipping away at the clarity before the desire ever takes root. But here's the thing: the subconscious mind does not respond to begging, hoping, or doubting. It responds to certainty. It responds to repetition. And it responds most powerfully to clear inner direction. Making a decision means dropping all the what ifs. It means no longer looking for outside validation or permission. It means there's no more trying to be realistic, because reality is shaped by what's being assumed to be true. So the moment there's hesitation or mental negotiation, the signal becomes weak. It's like trying to place an order while whispering the message doesn't land. But when something is decided with conviction, there's a shift in energy that can be felt immediately. It doesn't need to be loud or dramatic. In fact, the most powerful decisions are often quiet, but rooted so deeply that no part of the mind feels the need to explain or justify it. It's just known. And that kind of decision creates movement. The mind starts aligning, thoughts begin to shift, and even though nothing has changed in the outer world just yet, the inner world has already accepted it as done. That's the key. When something is decided upon clearly, the imagination begins working in that direction automatically. But if the decision is shaky, if there's still resistance or fear, then that energy leaks through and causes mixed results. So it's not about how badly something is wanted, it's about how firmly it's been chosen. There's a big difference between wanting something and deciding that it is already yours. Choosing something without apology also means refusing to shrink the desire down just because it hasn't shown up yet. The size of the desire doesn't matter. The timeline doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is the level of inner certainty. And no matter how long it takes to fully believe in it, the work is in returning to that decision again and again until the inner reality becomes more dominant than the outer one. Once that happens, it's only a matter of time before it shows up, because the outer world has no choice but to reflect what has already been fully accepted within. The second the decision is made, the next step is not to chase, not to check, not to prove anything, but simply to assume it's already done. And this is where most people hesitate again, because the mind wants evidence before belief, when in truth, belief is the thing that brings the evidence. The imagination must go first. It has to lead the way. But when that's fully understood, it becomes clear why things have felt stuck for so long. Because the only reason something hasn't moved yet is that deep down, the assumption hasn't changed. It might be desired. It might be visualized now and then. It might even be written down with affirmations and rituals. But if the dominant state inside still assumes lack, delay, separation, or impossibility, then the outer world reflects that, not the desire, but the assumption behind it. The key is realizing that assumption isn't about effort, and it's not about constantly forcing a thought. It's about shifting identity from someone who wants something to someone who already has it. That shift isn't about pretending or lying to the self. It's about mentally accepting something as true, even before the physical proof shows up. It's like stepping into a role so completely that the outside world eventually has to match it. And this is the exact thing that changes the entire energy field. When the assumption is clear and consistent, the outer reality reorganizes itself without force. It happens automatically. But it can't happen when there's still doubt running the show. Doubt is like rewriting the script halfway through the performance. It confuses the direction. It slows everything down. So the real work is mental. It's internal. It's private. It happens in the quiet moments, in the way things are spoken internally, in the way situations are interpreted, and in the way things are reacted to. And this internal environment is always giving away the dominant assumption. So if something is truly being assumed as done, then there's peace, there's calm, there's no urgency. Just like when something is ordered online, there's no constant refreshing, no need to check the mailbox every few minutes. There's trust that it's on the way. And that's exactly how manifestation works. The assumption creates the order, and reality handles the delivery. This is why Neville Goddard emphasized living in the end, because when something is lived as already done, it has no choice but to show up. The subconscious responds to that feeling of completion, not to anxiety or desperation. So the question isn't whether something can happen. The real question is whether the assumption being held lines up with the version of reality where it's already true. That's where the shift happens. That's where the power lies. And once the assumption is locked in, things start showing up without warning, not because something was forced, but because it was fully accepted within first. Once the decision has been made and the assumption has been claimed, there's only one thing left to do: persist. And this part is where most people lose their footing, not because they're doing anything wrong, but because they start looking around, trying to find proof in the outer world that it's working. And when they don't see it immediately, they begin to question everything. They think something went wrong, or that the technique needs tweaking, or that the desire was too big, or worse, that maybe they're not capable of having it. But the truth is, nothing went wrong. The only thing that happened is the assumption wasn't held long enough. It was interrupted. And the moment it gets interrupted with doubt or fear or confusion, the energy shifts, and that delays the reflection. Persistence isn't about obsessing or pushing or trying to feel perfect every second of the day. It's not about repeating affirmations like a robot or acting like the desire is already here when deep down it feels false. It's simply about continuing to return to the assumption calmly, consistently, and without needing instant results to validate it. It's about making that imagined reality the dominant inner truth, even while the outer world still looks the same. And that takes emotional discipline, not perfection, just the willingness to return to the end again and again, no matter what the current situation says. The outer world is always behind the inner one. It lags. It reflects past assumptions. So looking to it for confirmation is like looking at a mirror and waiting for the reflection to smile first. It doesn't work that way. The inner shift must happen first, and the mirror of reality catches up after. This is why so many people give up right before the breakthrough, because they start reacting to the old reality, thinking it means their manifestation isn't working, when in fact, it's just the last remnants of an old assumption playing out. That's the test. That's the moment where the old self wants to come back and take over. And that's exactly where persistence is needed most. To persist means to keep showing up mentally in the same assumption, even when nothing outside looks different. It means choosing the new story again and again, until it becomes more natural than the old one. And eventually, it does. The mind adjusts. The body relaxes. The state becomes familiar. And from there, things begin to shift in ways that feel effortless. Because the new assumption is finally planted deep enough that the subconscious accepts it as fact. This is the real work, not forcing reality to change, but persisting in the state where it already has. That's how manifestation works. Not through struggle or control, but through quiet inner conviction. Hold the assumption. Keep choosing it. Let that be the default. And watch how fast the reflection changes when the inner reality is no longer shaken by what appears outside. Once the decision is made, once the assumption is accepted, and once the inner world has become familiar with that new version of reality, the only thing that can throw the whole process off course is the habit of checking. And this is where so many people unknowingly block their own manifestation, not because they're doing anything wrong intentionally, but because they keep looking outside for a sign that it's working. They wake up and scan their phone for a message. They check the bank account. They look at the physical world hoping to find proof that something has changed. But here's the hard truth: checking is doubting in disguise. It seems harmless, but every time attention is placed on what's missing, the assumption starts to wobble, and the subconscious gets mixed signals. Manifestation is not about constantly watching the mirror, hoping it smiles back. The mirror only reflects what's already going on inside. And if the inner state is steady, confident, and calm, the reflection will catch up naturally. But if the inner state becomes desperate or impatient or restless, that gets mirrored back too. This is why some desires take so long, not because they're big or complicated, but because the assumption keeps getting interrupted by the need to verify. But reality doesn't respond to begging. It responds to belief. And belief doesn't constantly ask if it's working. Belief just knows. There's something deeply powerful about letting go of the habit of checking. It doesn't mean giving up on the desire. It means trusting the process so completely that there's no longer any emotional reaction to whether it's here yet or not. That's the kind of trust that creates miracles. Because the truth is, the moment something is fully accepted within, it's already done. The 3D world is just catching up, and it doesn't need to be rushed. Time is not the enemy. Delay isn't punishment. It's just the space between the assumption being made and the reflection forming clearly. And the more calm that space is held, the faster the bridge of events unfolds. So the practice becomes about maintaining the state, not searching for results. The imagination doesn't need constant supervision. Once the assumption is planted, it begins to unfold in perfect timing. But trying to dig up the seed every 5 minutes to see if it's growing only disrupts it. Letting it grow quietly is the real work. That's what faith looks like. It's not loud or dramatic. It's steady. It's quiet. it's patient, and it works. The reflection will change, it always does. But the more it's watched, the slower it moves, because attention is being placed on the absence. So instead of asking if it's coming, the better question becomes, am I still dwelling in the state where it's already done? Because once that becomes the normal place to live from, the outside has no choice but to mirror it back. Everything that's ever been manifested, whether consciously or unconsciously, has followed this exact process. It might have seemed like coincidence, luck, or the result of action. But underneath all of it was always a thought, an assumption, a quiet belief that something was either possible or inevitable. That's how powerful the mind is. It doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be consistent. And that's what makes this whole thing so much simpler than most people have been led to believe. Manifestation isn't a skill that only a few people have. It's not some mystical ability that requires years of study or layers of technique. It's natural, it's automatic, and it's always responding to the inner state, not to what is wanted, but to what is assumed to be true. The only reason it's ever felt hard is because the inner world has been filled with noise, doubts, fears, old beliefs, and contradictory thoughts that cancel out the desire before it has a chance to become real. But now that the process is clear, it becomes a choice. Not a fight, not a chase, just a quiet, firm, deliberate choice. And it starts by deciding what is wanted fully, unapologetically, and without explaining or negotiating with the past. Then, stepping into the assumption that it's already done. Not because the outer world agrees, but because the inner world accepts it as true. And finally, persisting in that assumption without needing to constantly check, fix, or force anything, because the seed has been planted and the mirror will reflect it in perfect time. There is nothing more to wait for. There is nothing to force. The question has already been answered, it's done. And now the work is in holding that inner state like a container, letting it grow and expand and settle into the body as the new normal. And it's okay if some days feel shaky. It's okay if the old thoughts try to return. The only thing that matters is which story is being chosen now. The outer world is always shifting based on the inner atmosphere. So when the decision is clear, the assumption is locked in, and the persistence is calm and steady, the 3D reality has no choice but to adjust. There's nothing magical about this process, and yet it feels like magic when it works. Because what's really happening is alignment with truth. The truth that imagination creates reality. The truth that assumptions become facts. The truth that it's always been this simple: decide, assume, and persist. If this message helped bring clarity, share in the comments what you're now choosing to assume for yourself. Sometimes just writing it down helps lock it in. And if this helped, don't forget to save it and return to it whenever things feel shaky. You've got this. It's already done.